A New Year's Nightmare. It was New Year's Eve in the middle of nowhere, just miles and miles of snow-covered fields, barren trees, and a chilling wind that swept across the desolate landscape. My friends and I had planned the perfect getaway, a secluded cabin in the countryside. We'd rented it online thinking it would be a fun adventure, away from the world with only each other and the great outdoors, a quiet place to escape to celebrate the start of the year. But as the night unfolded, that cabin would become a prison, trapped in time and terror. We arrived just before dusk as the sun sank behind the skeletal trees. The cabin was old, its wooden walls creaking in the wind, its windows covered in grime. Still, it had a rustic charm. We lugged our bags inside, started a fire, and cracked open the first bottles of champagne. Laughter echoed through the air as the fire blazed and the snow gently fell outside, blanketing the world in an eerie quiet. As the night wore on, we grew rowdier. We ate, drank, and played games, typical New Year's Eve festivities, but something about the place felt off. Something I couldn't put my finger on. It wasn't just the isolation, the cold, or the howling wind outside. It was a feeling like we were being watched. It was subtle at first, like a whisper carried on the wind, a faint voice, barely audible, calling my name. "Jack!" At first I thought I was just imagining it. I'd had a few drinks after all, but it was strange. It was so clear, so close. I tried to shake it off, but then I heard it again. "Jack, come outside." My skin crawled, my heart raced. It was coming from outside the cabin, from the woods. I glanced toward the window, but all I could see were shadows, dark shapes in the distance, shifting in the wind. I told myself I was just being paranoid, just a little drunk. But then, the door creaked open. No one had touched it. We all turned, but no one had moved. I jumped up, rushed to the door, and slammed it shut again. But the wind had stopped. The fire crackled low. And that's when it happened. A figure appeared in the doorway. He was tall, too tall, his silhouette looming in the light from the fire. He was gaunt, his skin pale as death, and his eyes, those eyes, they glowed, an eerie yellow light that cut through the darkness like twin lanterns. His face was distorted, hollow, like something out of a nightmare. His hair was tangled and wild, his clothes old, faded. He didn't speak at first, he just stood there staring at us with those glowing eyes. My blood ran cold. And then in a raspy, breathless voice he whispered, "Don't go out there. Leave now." Before we could even react, he turned away and walked off into the darkness. I could hear his footsteps crunching in the snow, then fading into the night. We all stared at the door in stunned silence. "Who the hell was that?" Kyle, one of my friends, whispered. "I don't know," I muttered, my voice shaky. "But we should stay inside. Now." But there was something in the air, a heaviness, a tension that none of us could shake off. It wasn't just fear, it was dread. A deep, gnawing feeling that something was wrong, that something terrible was coming for us. The minutes dragged on. The clock ticked closer to midnight, and we all tried to act normal, but the unease was suffocating. Every creak of the old cabin, every gust of wind outside made us jump, and then it happened. The door flew open again, this time with force. We scrambled back in fear, the wind howling through the opening. But it wasn't the wind. No, something else had done it. It was the figure, the man. He was back. But now his face was even worse, twisted, more grotesque, as if his skin had been stretched too tight. His eyes glowed even brighter, like burning embers, and his mouth, it was too wide. His lips split into a grin that shouldn't have been possible, revealing teeth that were sharp, jagged, like broken glass. He didn't speak, but his eyes told us everything we needed to know. We were not welcome here. I felt a surge of panic. "We need to leave, now!" I yelled, but the others were already frozen, rooted to the floor in terror. I felt a surge of panic. We need to leave, now! I yelled, but the others were already frozen, rooted to the floor in terror. We rushed toward the door, but it slammed shut before we could reach it. The man was gone, disappeared. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part was the sound. The sound of something moving in the woods, something coming toward us. The air turned colder, and then the whispering began. It was soft at first, almost like a breeze, but then it grew louder, more urgent. Come outside. Come to us. We didn't want to go. We tried to barricade the door, but the wood was old, fragile, and splintered under the pressure of something pressing against it from the other side. It felt like the very house was alive, groaning, shifting, as if it wanted us to leave. Suddenly the lights flickered and everything went dark. "Where's the flashlight?" Kyle asked, panic creeping into his voice. I fumbled around, my hands shaking, until I found the flashlight and turned it on. The beam cut through the darkness, but what it illuminated wasn't comforting. Outside, standing in the snow, was a figure. No, figures. At first, I thought it was just the shadows playing tricks on my eyes, but then they stepped closer, revealing themselves. They were like the man, but worse. Their bodies were twisted, distorted, as if they'd been pulled from the ground, half-rotted, with skin hanging in shreds. "Help us!" one of them croaked, its voice grating like nails on a chalkboard. It was a woman, half-frozen, her face gaunt, skin pulled taut over bones, and beside her a child no older than 6, its eyes wide and full of terror, but they weren't human. I felt my throat tighten. "No, get away from the window," I screamed. I grabbed my friends, yanking them away from the glass, but it was too late. The things outside saw us. They began to pound on the walls, clawing at the windows with fingers like claws, screeching in a chorus of agony and rage. We tried to escape through the back, but the door wouldn't budge. The windows were locked and the walls felt as though they were closing in. The very air in the room grew thick, suffocating. It felt like we were trapped in some kind of nightmare. Then the ground shook, hard. I heard it before I saw it, the sound of something large moving under the earth. The floor cracked beneath our feet, the very ground shifting, like the earth itself was coming alive. From beneath the cabin, something began to rise, something ancient, something that had been waiting. The creature that crawled from the depths of the earth was indescribable. It was a mass of writhing shadows and rotting flesh, with arms too long, too many, reaching toward us, grasping for our souls. Its eyes, red, burning, fixed on us with a hunger that could never be quenched. I turned and ran, but the others were already gone, swallowed by the darkness. I ran and I ran until I found myself back in the woods alone, stumbling through the snow, hearing nothing but the whispers. The voices that had once called me were now screaming my name, urging me to turn back. I didn't stop running until I collapsed, and the next morning when the authorities found me, I was delirious, covered in frost, my body marked by the cold. They found no trace of the cabin, no sign of my friends, and no explanation for what had happened. I've never returned to that place, never again. And every year on New Year's Eve I hear the whispers again. They call to me from the dark woods, asking me to come back to join them. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I still see the glowing eyes, feel the cold grip of the creature reaching for me from beneath the earth. So, I tell you this as a warning. If you ever find yourself out in the woods, alone on a cold winter night, and you hear a whisper, don't answer. Because something is waiting for you. Something that's been waiting for a very, very long time. And if you answer, you won't be coming back.